When Baba comes, at a time when Upasni Maharaj was called in our house, that was built, a new house by my father, and at that time Meher Baba came. He was not known as Meher Baba, he was known only as Meherwan. And I had gone ill at that time. I had malarial fever. Upasni Maharaj gave me certain pills and all that. And Meher Baba used to come. I stayed in another house, not the house where Upasni Maharaj was there. At the back, we had several houses in Ahmednagar. We were all joint rich family. So in the other house, this Meherwan used to come so often to me, nearly 50 times a day. Then I thought to myself, my mother loves me so much, my father, my friends, my relatives, and especially now this new element that has come into my life, this girl, loves me so much and I love her so much. But what is this compared to this man's love? I really think that he is the ocean of love. And all these small loves are like small water ponds of love. And if they were all put together, it would hardly equal the ocean. So why should I go after this? Why should I not go after the ocean? Probably that was the effect of his contact, Baba's contact. Otherwise it was, I felt it to be, today even I think over, I think that it was absolutely beyond me. But it did happen. And then I became very much reticent even to go and see the girl, imagine. In a short contact with Baba. She wrote letters to me, I did not reply. She wrote registered letters to me, I did not reply. And one of the registers was taken by my mother and given to Baba. So Baba, he also used to go in Pune from that hut to one of his disciples, Sadashiv Patel was his name, his house, 3-storied, 4-storied building. I used to go and stop there for a while. When he was there, my mother complained bitterly to Baba about me and this girl. So Baba said, now it should be completely now snapped off. So my mother was asked to bring this girl over to Sadashiv Patel's house. And Baba sat here. The girl was asked to sit here. I was asked to sit here. Gulmai, my mother, sat there. But I was asked not to face the girl, but to face the other direction and to show my back to the girl. And then Baba said to the girl in my presence, in my mother's presence, that it will not be of any use to you. This fellow is my servant. He doesn't belong to you. And you will not be very happy. And she started weeping and weeping and weeping and weeping. And then Baba set her right for a moment. My mother also explained to her, and then she went away home. And she was gradually reconciled to the situation, and then later on she married. This was the story. My father was a businessman. He always wanted me to marry and always wanted to join business, but I never listened to him. And when I was, after a certain period of having stayed with him, I was asked to go and live at home. And my father was a dealer in many things. He was an army contractor. We had motor business, we had cinema business. He was dealing in furniture, renting furniture, selling furniture. He was an auctioneer. And all that. And all the house, my office and all the entire rooms in my office were all filled with furniture that was to be rented. Now when Baba went and settled at Meherabad, so many things were needed there. So my mother used to ask me to get a truck. I brought the truck. I used to drive at the back of the house, and furniture after furniture was removed from there. Put in the truck and taken over to Meherabad and given away. Sometime later my father comes and says, Gula, where is this? This sofa was there, this dressing table was there. It is missing. Where is it? So Gula says, you don't bother about it. We have got many tables and many sofas. Why should you worry if a sofa or a table goes from here? He was aware of it. He also loved Baba in his own way. But he was not prepared like my mother to give away everything. And then what happened later on? When Baba disbanded the entire arrangement at Meherabad, He broke the whole entire colony for a time. He did that 2 or 3 times. All the temporary structures were demolished. All the furniture had to be sold out. All the material had to be sold out. And this was the furniture. Whom should it be sold? It should be sold to my father. And how could it be sold? It should be sold by an auction. And my father was the auction, my auctioneer. So he is called, he goes there, he says, and he gives a bid, he buys, he pays the money, and he says, look here, this is my furniture, my wife has sent me, and I am buying it now again. And it made my mother and myself very happy. That he had to give away so much money for Baba's cause, and along with it so many samskaras also, through which he got the money. And that way she felt, and I also felt. When he came at night, at late, he was a very hard-working man, self-made man. He rose from a pauper. He used to hang his coat there. We did not have hangers, and just he used to hang on a wall somewhere on a nail. And in his pocket there were 500 rupees. So Gulmai quietly takes out 300, leaves the balance of 200. In the morning my father comes. Naturally he tries to put on the coat and feels in his pocket. He says, Gula, what is this? Only I had 500 rupees and only 200 rupees. You go, you are going to earn much more money. Why do you bother about 300 and 500? But he did not object. He was very kind indeed. Because he knew, and he knew it was all going to Baba. He did not take any serious objection at all. That at least he allowed. That is it.
Just one more thing when we have lunch. What happened when your father complained to Baba about Baba spending so much money?
You see, Sarosh's father and my father were business in partners, 50-50. And a time came naturally that my elder brother married, Sarosh's elder brother married, I did not marry. So the whole thing had to be partitioned, 50-50. And we do not know if everything would have really gone very smoothly because of the different views, and one would say this belongs to me, another would say this one. So Baba in his presence got everything just separated. That was his grace, and it was his great help. Because I was vowed to give my entire property to him, which was done later on. And Gulmai also similarly. My sisters also similarly. But sister's share was given, of course. They did not give all. And then as Baba once came in my office and he was sitting there, and my father knew that Baba was spending much money. There was no source for money to come in. It used to come and go away. So my father in a joke told Baba, Baba, you spend so much money. You waste money. Baba says, I don't waste, I invest. Who knows? What are your relationships between the two? Who knows, third man? You may have taken a loan of $10,000 in the last life, so he is to be paid back. You do not know, I know. That is it. Yes. Then for Jai Baba.
I must say that by this stage I am quite convinced there's far too much talking going on, especially with the highlights that exist. I feel that my giving a talk at this stage is a dilution rather than an addition, and maybe that's why they call it a retreat instead of an advance. But everything is... You think that I'm going to fall off? Okay. My own impression when I come to an event like this is that there are so many gems that come from the chats with someone like Adi, who has been soaked in Baba's love, and then hearing the inspirational story of my longtime friend, Jim McGrew, has simply made me say, what for? But then again, it's on the schedule, so it all seems a great paradox, as most of it does. the whole idea of a retreat, calling it a retreat. That's, I guess, technically what we're supposed to be doing. We've advanced as far as we should, reaching evolution, and now we're retreating and attempting to undo all that we've done before. And I think that the most that I can do today is to try to share a dream that I had several years ago, which goes by the description of meeting Baba. And many of you have heard that story before. And I hope that those of you who have heard it will not be bored, and I'm sure that if you are, you know where the several exits are. But as I look around, it occurs to me that there are many people who have not heard that, and it's certainly the most valuable thing that I have to share. I could get a running start from way back in the early days, but then it would be time to go swimming by the time I reached the meeting. And so I will try to omit the early days of casting about in a variety of different directions and paths, various yogas and meditations, masters and teachers, yes, even potions and elixirs. All those things that one does when the heart grows restless with the everyday world. And for a long time, there had been some minor discontent in my life, though it had been relatively smooth, and it had, as all of you know, who I take absolutely for granted that it's a familiar feeling at some time or other, or else you wouldn't be here, that urging that makes eating, sleeping, and working not quite enough is what we owe our presence here to, and what the avatar counts on to get us to awaken to his presence in the world. I had come across Baba in college days and had been immediately struck by his absolute authenticity, his authority, the simplicity with which he seemed perfect. It all seemed to gel and make a dream come true happen in the present. The dream being the reading about Christ and Buddha and Krishna and Mohammed, and imagining what it might be like to live in the era of the rarest event, as Adi has so beautifully described, the time during which the avatar comes. It's not that the avatar is not here when he is not in the body, nor that God doesn't tend his garden, but the charge that exists in the world is certainly different, and the sense of the importance of the time for us humans steeped in ignorance certainly grows. The feeling that now is the time to make the effort, now is the time to attempt to get about what we should be about all the time, is made so clear by the presence of the avatar. He just presents a standard to us of what we should be doing. And I was able to get to India really with the feeling that I was going to have the chance to meet many of his lovers in India. I had already grown convinced that Baba was the avatar through some 18 months of reading some of his books and meeting many of his close lovers in the West, seeing some films of him. It all struck perfectly true, and I didn't feel that I needed any more convincing. But I did feel that rubbing elbows with those who had spent a great deal of time with him would be amazingly valuable. And that in India, where he had spent so much time with so many people, I felt the opportunity would be there to take his impression, his influence out of books and make them recognizable in a very human way, in a personal way. Find those traits and those little subtle emphases that come from years in the Master's presence available to me. I knew that Baba was in seclusion. I also knew that he had seen a small handful of people who had happened to be in India or had gotten there one way or another in the last year or two since the Eastern Sahavas in 1965. But so sure was I about his seclusion that I hadn't great hopes of meeting him at the time. As a matter of fact, even saying great hopes may present the wrong picture. I had suspended the idea of getting to meet Baba during this visit to India because I had expected that that chance would come when he offered the next Sahavas. I was also, by this time, feeling that one thing that I could do that created a definite link between me and Baba was to not want to see him, not wish to see him when he had expressly suggested that no one should try to see him, that he was in seclusion, that his work required seclusion. And so I had gone there really quite thrilled to the brim with the prospect of meeting those close to him. I had had some correspondence with Adi. I had alerted him to my impending trip and expected to be in touch with him from time to time just to find out where various Baba lovers in different parts of the country were. It didn't take long for me to find a vacation time to use for the purpose of visiting some of Baba's lovers in Bombay and Pune. That seemed a logical place to start since Pune had been the place of his birth and Bombay was close by and there was an active group of Baba people there. And I set off on a train one night in the middle of August, third class, late in the evening, an all-night trip with 2 weeks that I was going to split between Bombay and Pune. And on my arrival the next morning, rather bedraggled, about 6 in the morning, got off the train. I was greeted by 2 gentlemen in business suits who spoke quite good English and who were the major representatives of the Baba group in Bombay. Keshan Gajwani and Siganporia were the 2 people that had greeted me. And it wasn't 5 minutes before they said, well, we hear you're going to see Meher Baba. And that was the first I heard of it. What had happened was that Adi had sent a letter a few days before to my address in Ahmedabad, about 200 miles north of Bombay, saying that Baba would see me on the 17th of August with a couple of other people at such and such a time, and that I should notify him right away if I were able to make that appointment. But that letter arrived the day that I left, the day following my departure. So my first word of this meeting was through these 2 people, and they must have thought I was absolutely nuts and totally coy because I said, no, I've just come to visit you Baba lovers. And of course they knew that this meeting was set up, assumed that I knew it, and what kind of response would that seem to be? No, I fully content just to meet with you Baba people here. And they said, no, we know you're meeting with Baba in a few days. I said, no, you're wrong. I think my impression was that they had assumed that that's why I was coming. And I was simply quite firm. I said, no, I'm not. And they said, well, we have a letter to that effect. And at that point it began to dawn on me that quite out of the blue and within about a month and a half of my stay in India, something quite amazing was in the works. And that began a week of some very interesting thoughts the thoughts, the meeting had been scheduled for a week from then. And I thought, my God Almighty, how can this be? Baba's in seclusion, but he's going to meet a couple of other people, and he's extended this opportunity. Fantastic. Through some connections from people in the West that I'd known, I met a very dear couple, Nariman and Arnivaz Dadachanji, and was having dinner with them 2 nights later. My mind was really quite spinning at this time, anticipating the possibility of this meeting. And just after dinner, a phone call came, and Arnivaz answered the phone and was speaking quite animatedly in Gujarati. Oh, Adi! On went a conversation about 10 minutes, and after the phone call, about which I had quite a strong sense that it related to my visit. She came and said, well, the meeting has been canceled, which certainly didn't surprise me. I had read enough of Baba that I expected expectations to be shattered more than once before reaching the goal. And this seemed to me a perfect setup. As a matter of fact, it just didn't seem surprising at all. And in the next breath, she said, that meeting has been canceled. It has been moved up, and you're to meet with Baba on the 15th, not the 17th, and alone. That was a new piece of information to digest, and from that moment on, I really was much more suspicious than I had been up till then that the meeting would never take place. I say this quite seriously because it seemed to me all too obvious how Baba works, how he creates expectations and then destroys them and works on you not by what you see as the apparent result, not by fulfilling what you want to happen, but making you adaptable to what he knows is best for you. And with that one change, a million changes appeared possible. Each day that followed, I expected new word that this couldn't be happened, but there was another date or another time. But it didn't take place like that. I was just in a state of mild suspended animation on tenterhooks of a very subtle sort, awaiting the possibility of a change, holding my breath in mid throat, you might say, because it just seemed that should I inhale too long or exhale too loudly, that meeting would be moved aside. I was put on the train by those two gentlemen who handled me as if I were a newborn babe. They said, no, it is our duty to put you on the train, and not only that, you must take this ticket. And I said, I have the money to buy it. This is our station, Bombay. This is the duty that Baba has given us to see that you get on your way and can reach your destination safely. So you must accept this. I got on the train and was meant to pull into Pune at 5 a.m., at which point, because Adi was in Pune at that time for some business, he was going to meet me at the platform and then drive me to Ahmednagar and then to a 9 o'clock meeting with Baba on the morning of August 15th. My major concern, with absolutely no hesitation, I can say, was waking up at 5 o'clock at the Pune station. I'm sure that nobody on the train really cared whether I got up at 5 o'clock and got off, and I could well imagine that the conductor on the car that I was on really could easily have forgotten to notify me that this was the station. But oddly enough, I awoke and he approached the cabin just about the same time, got off the train in pitch darkness, and through the bustle of people I saw Adi's white mane looking around for I guess, the only Westerner approaching Pune at 5 a.m. that day. And we met and greeted, and he took me directly to his car, and he had a young man who was driving, and Adi and I sat in the back for a 2-hour drive to Ahmednagar. And the sun was coming up, and I fell into deep conversation with Adi. Later, many times he reminded me, I've never heard so many questions as all that you ask. And I don't remember asking so many questions as simply being lost in a dreamy world of constant conversation with one who had been all his life with Baba. It was a heady back seat, a remarkable drive, and we arrived probably 8 o'clock at Sarosha's house, and I took a bath and showed up for breakfast. Adi, being part of the family for years, was having breakfast there and chatting very nonchalantly and familiarly with Sarosh and Vilu, and it was an extraordinarily good breakfast, very Western breakfast, eggs and bacon and toast, and I was finished with it in a flash because I was facing a clock on the wall that was past 8:30 and moving toward 9, and in the instructions that I'd had, I was to be at Meherzad at 9 o'clock sharp. And Adi seemed to be taking his time. He asked for another cup of tea, nursed it a while, more bread. I was astounded. It was 18 to 9, 17 and a half to 9, and really feeling, what is this? He said, don't, you see, we have to be careful now to be on time, he said. We'll get a swift kick in the pants if we're not on time. Baba really wants promptness. More tea. I was all for this idea of promptness, but Adi seemed to be taking it completely easy, and then he said, but don't worry, it'll be my seat he kicks, not yours, if we're not on time. And my thoughts immediately, look, I don't care whose seat gets kicked. Let's just, this one appointment, one time in my life that I would like to be on time. I think the effort expended mentally for me to try to be on time then has made it impossible for me to be on time at any other time forever. And that's my excuse. It was 17 to 9 that Adi said, well, let's go. And jumps up, and we get into his car and start rolling toward Meherzad in scenery that looked uncannily familiar. I mean, the close to the road scene looked like western Kansas. It was very brown and dry, and apart from the bullocks that one nearly ran into and the hills in the distance, it was very brown and dry, and apart from the bullocks that one nearly ran into and the hills in the distance, it didn't seem remarkably different territory than the middle of the United States. And we were just rolling along in really quite a dream. I hadn't thought of this meeting too much. I hadn't really thought of what it would entail, what it would involve, what should be done. I don't know why. Perhaps because it was all far too intimidating. It really didn't seem to be necessary. I'm sure Baba knew what he intended, and I didn't do much second guessing. I simply rode out and looked at the scenery and arrived in a dust cloud at Meherzad. Many of you will be familiar with what Meherzad looked like at that time. It hasn't changed a great deal. But in the central courtyard, where there is now a shading over the veranda, that was gone, and there were just a few simple buildings out in what appeared to be the middle of nowhere, with Baba's seclusion hill in the background. And there were a few chickens, and there were a couple of dogs, and it looked like an arrival at a farm anywhere. It was totally quiet. Sound of the chickens, the dogs moved away, and the car came to a stop. There were no people anywhere visible. It was just totally quiet. And at the sound, I presume, of the approaching car, Erich emerged from the doorway into Mandali Hall. Something I did not know, by the way. He emerged from some doorway and walked down the courtyard and threw his arms open. "Oh, Rick, so good to see you here. Come on, come on." As if I had known him for most of my life, with a familiarity that was uncanny, a warmth that made me feel completely at ease. And he just chit-chatted as we walked along. His arm was around me, said, "Baba's waiting to see you, and when you do see him, he would like you to embrace him and then sit down." I said, "Good, fine." And we turned into a doorway. There were no instructions as to what was going to happen, nor preparation. I kicked my shoes off and walked in, and the transition from the bright Nagar sunlight into a dark, unlit room was rather dramatic when I went into the door, and it was quite dim. And I didn't know if I was in the place where I would wait for a few minutes and then be told that Baba would be able to see me in half an hour or 15 minutes or whatever, or what. I did see a few people sitting on the floor. I saw, in fact, someone that I recognized from a few days before. Nariman was sitting there. Nariman Dadachandji, at whose home I had had dinner in Bombay. His familiarity with Baba was so great, his and his wives, that they were really the only non-resident Mandali who could come and go as they wished at any time during Baba's seclusion. They were Baba's Mandali in the world, to a degree that I have not seen in a couple, with an intimacy that parallels that of any of the Mandali. And they stand as an example to me as a couple who live in the world. Nariman was a very successful businessman with a chemical company. His wife Arnavaz, a very beautiful woman and a very worldly wise woman. She dressed well. Her apartment was well decorated. She was a perfect hostess, yet simple. No show. It's just that she was familiar with life and with people, and could relate to people easily. They stand as a perfect example to me as people who can live in the world, yet who are completely, in their hearts, absorbed in Baba. Probably 90% of the people who knew the Dadachandjis were unaware of their association with Baba. They did not proselytize, they did not even speak about Baba to many people. Arnavaz once told me that she would wait sometimes weeks and months with a new acquaintance or a friend to see if there was any interest at all, or maybe they would ask, "Oh, we've heard don't you have some association with Meher Baba? Who is he? And then give some inadequate answer, so that if it was perceived as inadequate, they would pursue it. And if it weren't, then they weren't ready for any more effort or attention. Their life was Baba, and yet they lived very successfully in the world, in that particular dream that Baba had sketched out for them. A beautiful example for any Westerners of the possibility of living Baba's life anywhere without the appearance of any change from mundane living. I saw Nariman on the floor, and I brightened, almost said, "Oh, I'm Nariman, how are you doing?" But at the same time, I glanced Francis Brabazon, whose photograph I had seen before, and I recognized him, sitting at an odd distance from Nariman. Not close enough to really be chewing the fat, not so far away as to be engaged in something totally other, as was Aloba, whom I saw somewhere else. It suddenly dawned on me that these people weren't just hanging around in this room, but were seated in the presence of Baba. Then the great challenge, which remains to the very day, to find him. I would like to impress upon you that whatever the case may have been, and however absurd it may sound, it seemed like 10 or 15 seconds passed in the realization that Baba was in the room, the determination that the natural thing to do would be to look over around the people in the room to find him, and not to go too fast so as to go past him and then, oh, of course. And yet not go too slow so that it would take forever to find him. It sounds crazy, certainly does to me, but I was going like this. It probably seemed much longer than it was. But when I finally discovered Baba, he was about a full body length of a normal-sized American away, seated in his chair in the corner of the room, beaming in such a fashion as to put the "Don't Worry, Be Happy" poster out of print. A mere grimace. He was just completely enlightened, with a smile that said everything, and his arms were open like this, and I went over to him and hugged him and embraced him on the other side. And I sat down almost immediately, and Eric said, "No, over here," and I came back a few steps and sat down along the wall that faced his chair. Immediately Baba began to gesture. And immediately as I had moved away from him, Bao, one of his longtime Mandali, moved into place with his back toward me and began massaging Baba's calves. Something I had asked Bao about on subsequent visits. I said, was this something that, since Baba wasn't moving about much at that time, you did for his circulation? He said, no. Was it just kind of a massage that he enjoyed, or no? So what was it, Bao? It was just an opportunity he gave me to serve him. I had a lot of time with Bao, and I asked him from every angle that I could possibly ask him. And that was his explanation of what he was doing. And I begin to feel that many things that Baba makes possible for people are just that. They're just as simple as that. Whether they seem as unrelated to anything important as for Bao this massage was, that had no end. It wasn't a means to some end. It was the end. It was a service. Likewise, the things that we take as most important, whether they're, quote, work for Baba, earning our living, raising a family, improving our character, all these now for the lover of Baba become really just pressing his calf. They become, I'm convinced, nothing more than what you do to pass the time while you're remembering him. They are an end at the very instant they happen, because they are now Baba's. They matter not at all for you, no matter what the world tells you, or what you think, or what we come to value and appreciate through the momentum of the ignorance of civilization. Bow moved into place, and I sat down, and Baba began to gesture, and his first question, how did you sleep on the train last night? And I smiled. I said, I slept very well, thank you. But my mind has been very excited. He said, but I have been very excited. He goes, why is that? I said, oh, this opportunity to be with you here now. When thousands of people in the West and in the East are longing to have a chance to see you again, is very, very precious. This Sahavas that was mentioned before by Jim, Christmas 1965, set a context for that. Many people had signed up for flights to India to meet with Baba, and this was really the first Sahavas flight that had been arranged since a small burgeoning in the ranks of Baba people, since there was a growth in the number of young people who were becoming interested in Baba. So that trip was really going to be substantially different from earlier trips. Many people had been involved with Baba before, but it had been a relatively quiet movement and a definitely limited gathering. And the same faces would tend to show up at Myrtle Beach or New York or California with some additions. Now the gates were opening and young people were becoming interested in mysticism and Baba in particular, and that trip had created great expectations on the part of many people who had never been to see Baba. And its being canceled had put everyone in a holding pattern with the subsequent feeling of a link with Baba, that it was according to his wish that they were waiting, and that they were doing his work by waiting, that they were fulfilling his wish by waiting for him to call. And so when I had left the United States to go to India, not to mention to go to meet Baba, many people said, some of the old lovers who had not seen Baba for many, many years, because the last Sahavas had been 65 for the Easterners, and the one before that had been 62 for the East-West gathering. Many people had not seen Baba for 4 or 5 years or longer. I said, all these people longing to see you, this is, I feel, this very wonderful moment. As a matter of fact, I had toyed with the whole issue of how do you leave the avatar? I mean, is it really right to go to your master and walk away saying, thank you, it was a very lovely meeting. I really enjoyed it. I've gotten a lot from it, and I hope to see you again sometime. If you really feel strongly, should you not demonstrate that? Should you not say, I want to stay, I must stay, or will you let me stay, or should I stay, or I'll go. No, did you say stay? Or so the closest I got to broaching the subject of whether or not it would be appropriate for me to stay longer than this brief meeting was to say, if I were to give you an embrace for everyone who sent their love to you before I left, I would be here for a month. Without a blink, he said, yes, you're very fortunate to be here now. He didn't pick up on that subtle hint. He said, because as of today, my seclusion will be even stricter than it has been, and only these intimate ones will see me. He says, sometimes someone will pester me, oh, Baba, there's so-and-so to see you, there's this important, he'd say a colonel or someone from the army or some dignitary, the local dignitary in the town, and I'll say, I don't want to see them. And they'll say, oh, please see them. It's very important. They really want to see. No. Finally, they badger me, he said. I say, bring them. They come. I let them kiss me on the cheek, and they go away. And he said, I don't like it. I was sitting here. Well, I sure know what you mean, That would be so disgusting. And he simply said that, and he said, you're very fortunate to be here, but pay no attention to the thoughts of the mind. And somehow, probably because he wasn't interjecting all this other business, that comment linked directly with my statement, yes, I had slept very well on the train, but I've been very excited. And when he said why, I told him, and he said, but pay no attention to the thoughts of the mind. The mind will have every kind of thought, good and bad. But it's not important. You must long for me with your heart. And then he said, and he had gotten reasonably serious and was simply saying, as a matter of fact, pay no attention whatsoever to the spiritual path, to the planes of consciousness, or to any spiritual experience. He was just going, they are nothing but toys for children, because they're nothing but illusion, he said. You must strive to see me as I really am. So, in a breath, he summed up what? Everything? A lifetime made clear, absolutely clear, what was and what was not important. Here, the master of the plains, the beloved of the path, he who knew all spiritual experiences and had described in the way that no one ever had in God Speaks and the discourses, the intricacies of the path, the mechanics of involution, the purpose of creation. Pay no attention whatsoever to these things. For they're nothing but illusion, because, he said, they're nothing but toys for children because they're nothing but illusion. You must strive to see me as I really am. Immediately, the park bench in Bombay came back to me. I was sitting there 3 days earlier reading The Everything and the Nothing. A short but very special discourse about becoming headless and footless had caught my attention. He who has eyes but does not see, he who has ears but does not hear, he who has a tongue but does not speak, he can see me as I should be seen and know me as I should be known. This flashed before me, and what out of context may have seemed to be a totally cryptic remark seemed perfectly acceptable it made sense. It felt exactly right. You should strive to see me as I really am. He then looked at me and said, but how will you see me as I am? And by great fortune, didn't give a chance for me to say a word. I didn't know whether I was going to try to answer that question. I really had no thoughts in my mind other than the fact that I must have appeared a little bit like a windshield wiper, because there were a number of gnats in Mandali Hall at the time, and I tried hard to strike a balance between having a bunch of them in front of me and having none of them in front of me by going like this all the time. So every once in a while I would my major preoccupation at the time. He said, how will you see me as I am? He said, by longing for me with your heart. That struck home. And then he said, but where will you get this longing? Again, a rhetorical question from the Avatar, and he said, by loving me. You must strive to see me as I really am, he said. Then he asked a couple of questions. One was related to a response that he had sent to Richard Alpert regarding some questions that Alpert had had about drugs, and he said, did you see that letter that I sent to Alpert? I said yes, and he beamed. And then I spoke with him briefly. I had a few longings of the heart that I expressed to him, not in the form of longings, but simply a statement of my feeling. He heard me out a sentence or two. That was all there was. And he said, have you met Francis Brabazon? I said, no, I haven't met Francis. I've read many of his books. Up till this point, I should point out, I had not taken my eyes off of Baba, not for a second. I had heard a story by Sarabji Siganporia in Bombay. He was the fellow who had headed the Bombay group, and at one time, to make a long, interesting story short and try to capture the interest as well, there had been a long discussion about Baba coming to spend a day with the Bombay group, and they were going to have a lunch together, and they had investigated a hall where they could have this lunch, and they had talked about the kinds of meals, and they had a committee to decide what meals would be provided for the 100 or 200 people that would come, what it would cost, what the meals would consist of. There grew to be some problems. There were, of course, vegetarians and non-vegetarians. There were poorer and more wealthy. And there was a great difficulty in deciding what exactly would be served and how much it should cost these people, how much they would chip in. 2 rupees, 3 rupees, 4 rupees. Would there be non-vegetarian food? Oh no, my God, some people said, no non-vegetarian food. Baba wouldn't have. But the others said, Baba feels you can eat whatever. But that isn't right for us. It should all be the same. And so Gajwani and Siganporia approached Baba in Merazad one day and said, Baba, we're coming along fine with these plans. We have just a couple of problems here. There are some people that feel this about the lunch and some that, about the cost. Some don't feel that they can probably afford. Baba said, cancel it. Cancel it? No, it's not a serious problem, Baba. No, we won't have lunch. Oh, Baba, they were crushed. Everything gone. And it remained gone. It wasn't to be reestablished. A mistake was made and a lesson probably learned. But Sarabji had that urging. It doesn't seem right. If Baba is going through Bombay, then we must have him for lunch. So we'll invite him to our home at least and have him for lunch. And finally Baba said, okay, just at your home. So his wife and family made a meal, and Mandali showed up with Baba, and they went into the house and sat down and had a meal, and the Mandali finished before Baba, probably as their habit, to be prepared to do whatever Baba wished, and needed to wash their hands, and the washroom was up a flight of stairs from the level on which they were eating. So Sarabji, I'll take you up just a minute, and showed them up to the washroom. Here's the towel, soap, everything okay, back down. Baba was at the door, leaving. Sarabji's heart fell out through his abdomen. What? Come on, let's go. We're finished. Baba, the women, we haven't finished. They wanted to perform arti, have a chance to. No, come. Oh, but they'll be so disappointed without arti. Okay, arti, quickly, arti. Meher Baba Mandali, you know. And since that time, Sarabji realized, and has passed on from time to time, that when you have God to dinner, you don't give a damn what his Mandali are doing, what those dusty particles are doing. They're dirty enough down there at his feet. Let them find their way to the washroom. Find a servant to take them. Don't get up from the table and leave the avatar sitting there. And he had told me that story, and it impressed me greatly. And so I had decided that I was not going to be glancing around the room or even kind of just looking at, Baba's fingers or toes or anything else, just looking at him. And he finally said, well, have you met Francis Brabazon? No. Well, meet Francis. So at this time it seemed legitimate, appropriate, maybe even necessary to turn away. I shook Francis's hand. He had a sheaf of papers, and Baba said, read that one that you read the other day. And he read a ghazal about some bloke who had been hanging around the bar ever since one fateful day when the old man of the tavern had given him a taste of his rarest vintage. And he would do anything to pass the time. He swept the floor with his eyelashes, waited outside the door with one longing, one hope, and that was to have the chance again to taste that nectar.